you'd like to mention your name, please.
My name is Esma Garnawi. I live in Sweetway, and I'm here to ask these people how they can help the Sweetway residents, because we ask for MP, we ask for the Cornelians, I don't know, head of councillor. They didn't even bother to help us. They didn't do anything to us, and we don't trust anyone.
Okay, so your question is...
And they make all the residents suffering. Till now, we're still suffering. They give us, they throw us everywhere, like they put us far away from schools, from work. I'm a hard worker, and even they don't care.
Thank you very much. So I think we got the question. Mike, do you want to kickstart this then?
Well, actually, the issue on regeneration is difficult. If you want to build more homes, if you want to regenerate the estates, sometimes actually that estate is, I think, an MOD, Ministry of Defence estate. That means that those estates have to be demolished and rebuilt. If you want to build new homes of a high standard, with more homes on the site...
But they,
sorry, excuse me.
Okay.
Please let him speak.
All right.
Thanks.
It's actually outside of the constituency, but I know enough about it to be able to understand on regeneration. You cannot argue that we want more housing unless we regenerate our estates, where we increase the utilisation of the land on our estates. And that does mean that housing has to be demolished and rebuilt. But secure tenants, is my understanding, will be rehomed in brand new properties. And that is the plan. But you cannot deal with the social housing crisis without building more homes. You can't oppose every regeneration scheme and then say we want more homes. It goes hand in hand.
Brilliant. All right, Sarah, what's your answer?
Thank you very much for your question about Sweetway. Sweetway, although it's outside the constituency, is symptomatic of the crisis facing Londoners in housing across the board. And it's all very well for Mike to refer to the need for regeneration and the building of more homes. But that's no good if the homes are unaffordable and out of the reach of ordinary Londoners. And we're seeing that right across the constituency in regeneration programmes such as Brent Cross, Cricklewood. Only 15% of the housing proposed there is designed to be affordable, and even then, that's at 80% of market rent. If Labour gets elected, we are genuinely committed to delivering more affordable housing. If you want to understand the difference between a Labour approach and a Conservative approach, look at the social housing and the affordable housing being built by Labour councils such as Camden and Islington, and compare it to Barnet. And one final point, it's not just about home ownership, it's also about affordable rent. Labour will deliver a better deal for renters by capping rents and creating more secure tenancies. Okay,
thank you very much. So we're going to go to Jonathan and then Adele. If you have a question on this, if you can just put your hands up and keep them up if that's okay. Certainly towards the point at which Adele is ending, and we'll try and take all the questions in one round together from you, get the panellists to respond, and then go to the next question. Right, Jonathan?
I fear that what Sarah has just spoken about and what her cabinet colleagues have been speaking about today of capping rents, and also the Tory idea of right to buy, will both reduce the amount of affordable housing, will reduce the availability of rented housing and affordable housing. Ultimately, the only way we will get more affordable housing in this country is by building more houses. But that has to be done where it is wanted by the local community. There are large parts, spring areas surrounding London, where garden cities will be welcomed by the local community, and where we can build the additional housing this country and this city needs without imposing overdevelopment on local people.
Thank you very much. I'm so impressed the panellists are keeping their responses to the point and precise. It's going to help us getting through the questions. Adele.
I'm really glad there's someone here from Sweetway, because you may remember I came and protested with you on that day. I was really disappointed not to see any Labour candidates there, and they really needed a lawyer, and I was very disappointed that Sarah's a lawyer in our constituency in the court didn't go and help the people. That really could have helped.
We didn't get any help from no one.
From nobody from the council either. So I want to say that first of all, and I will keep campaigning with all of you whatever happens on May the 7th. We need more social housing, we need more affordable housing, we need to stop demolishing and moving families. Mike says that the massive demolition that's going on of council estates around this area, I've been shocked by it. He says secure tenants were allowed to stay. Insecure tenants had been living in these places for 16 years or more. Their children only know those as their homes. They're being moved from their schools during GCSEs, so that's really not a good answer. Compulsory purchase orders were served on people as old as 82 who were moved from homes that they thought they'd live their lives out in, not just in Sweets Way, but in the West Hendon estate, Whitefields estate, just across from Brent Cross, just for greed and commercial.
Okay, thank you very much.
And
So now,
it's been in The Guardian, the callousness of Tory Council moving the poor out of Barnet.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to ask, however, the panel for a simple yes or no answer, if that's okay, on pledge number 1, actually in the Muslim manifesto, which was being asked by Muslims all across the UK to their candidates, and that's quite simply this, because a lot of the candidates spoke about double standards and we shouldn't operate double standards. But UK law does contain an extraordinary deficiency at the moment when it comes to protection of communities in terms of incitement to racial hatred versus incitement to religious hatred. For the audience's benefit, put simply, the law as it stands sets the threshold at a very fair level when prosecuting for incitement to racial hatred, in the sense that to insult, abuse or use violent or threatening words against somebody based on their race, which covers the black community, the Jewish community and the Sikh community under UK law, is likely to be incitement to racial hatred. But when you look at it from a religious perspective, which is largely what governs the Muslim community, it's perfectly fine to insult somebody based upon their religious identity, to use abusive words or behaviour. In fact, the law specifically contains an exemption even to the point of violent or threatening words or behaviour, unless they are used with an intention to stir up religious hatred. So in other words, the threshold is much higher and, as many people have commented, virtually unworkable, meaning since 2006 nobody has ever been prosecuted under the incitement to religious hatred. But to prosecute under racial hatred is very straightforward. So I guess the kind of simple yes or no answer, if we can get it from the panel, starting with Adele, is will you work to equalise that threshold? Meaning whatever it takes to prosecute against incitement on Sikhs, Jews and blacks is exactly the same in terms of prosecuting when it comes to Muslims.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
You'd agree with that, okay? Jonathan,
I'm not sure this is capable of a one-word answer.
Okay.
I'm afraid. Equalise,
Take two.
Equalise, absolutely yes. But the test has to be incitement to hatred or incitement to violence, not merely causing offence. I think everything all 4 of us have said on this platform has probably offended 3 people. That can't make something illegal.
Sure, but that wasn't the question. The question was the threshold which currently exists for black people, Sikh people and Jewish people. Are you happy for that burden of proof, as so to speak, that threshold, to be applied to Muslim people?
Threshold must be the same. Absolutely.
Okay, that was the question. Okay, so 2 yeses, over to 7.
Yes.
Okay, and over to Mike.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Right, so we shall move on.
Prevent strategy, it's kind of widely, I think, within the Muslim community, is viewed as a complete disaster and very counterproductive. The government has boycotted like mainstream organisations like MCB.
Bit louder, sorry, we can't hear you.
The government has boycotted working with mainstream Muslim organisations like MCB. How do they expect to solve the problem without engaging with the Muslim community on this issue? That's the first question. Secondly, when the government is consulting with Muslim community, they're consulting with people that do not represent the Muslim community. For example, the Quilliam Foundation, one of the main representatives from here is Marjan Nawaz, who was recently exposed to be going to strip clubs and all this kind of stuff.
Okay, can we leave the detail? I'm sorry, we're in a mosque. I think everybody knows how he was exposed in the meal, but anywhere else, sorry, I wouldn't have stopped you, but as we're in a mosque, if that's okay, sorry.
Just with regards to what was Mike Freer's voter record on the recent counter-terrorism legislation that's been put, if you could clarify that as well, please.
So can I just understand, Prevent has been a disaster from a Muslim community perspective, is what you're saying. What presumably will the parties do to make it more effective? Mainstream Muslim organisations have been boycotted by the government, like the Muslim Council of Britain, for argument's sake, and instead dealing with organisations like the Quilliam Foundation, who, yes, I think everyone in the Muslim community will accept has virtually no credibility in the Muslim community. And how did Mike vote on the counter-terrorism legislation? All right, well, let's give Mike a second to put his responses to that and start with Jonathan first.
Government clearly needs to engage with the Muslim community through those bodies that you consider. It is for the Muslim community to decide which bodies represent the Muslim community, and government needs to engage. And government needs to engage with those bodies. I had a debate in another hat with the Board of Deputies engaging with the Muslim Council of Britain, which was opposed by some, and I strongly supported it. Regarding the counter-terrorism legislation, I am very concerned, and the Liberal Democrats are very concerned, that if as a result of terrorism, and clearly there have been serious terrorist attacks both in this country and even more seriously and more recently in other countries, but if as a result of terrorist attacks we deny fundamental civil liberties, then the terrorists have won. And that is a debate that has been, again, one of the biggest debates within government between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives in the coalition to ensure that we do not give up our fundamental civil liberties.
Okay, did you answer everything? I think you did, yeah. Adele?
Yes, I was very surprised to read about Prevent in your manifesto and the way that school children are being treated, especially very young ones, having had sons who go to schools and my older son's best friend is Muslim and mixing with them, and there's so much open dialogue. It would be so easy to engage with the Muslim community on this rather than doing it the way they are. So I agree with what's been said so far. You should engage with them. There's something called the dark web. The people who really are terrorists, they use a kind of...
Do the Greens feel Prevent's been a failure, Adele? Do the Greens feel Prevent's been a failure?
I haven't asked the Greens on this, but reading the manifesto, it certainly didn't look like something that I felt.
I think you should.
Right way to do it.
Just so you know the answer.
I think I will.
Go on. And sorry, on boycotting, apologies, on the other points about boycotting Muslim organisations, the mainstream representatives, which this government clearly has done, officially, pretty much. What's your view on that? Would the Greens do the same? Or?
I think it's very important to have that dialogue with the Muslim community and their organisations. Yes, it's essential.
Right, Sarah.
Let me start by saying something which may sound a bit unexpected. I don't stand here saying that Labour has always got things right. I think one of the first mistakes we made was in calling this strategy Prevent, because it sounded like there was some inherent danger in the Muslim community which we were somehow trying to prevent. And I don't say that Labour governments in the past have always got it right on civil liberties and counter-terrorism legislation either. In fact, I think a lot of what the previous Labour government did a great deal of harm to alienate the government and the Muslim community. And I think the first way to starting to get things right is to acknowledge that. So, I know, cheesy as it sounds, I think actually we almost need to start over and maybe dismantle the whole Prevent strategy altogether and re-engage with the Muslim community through those bodies that you regard as representative. And that's not going to be the MCB alone. The MCB alone doesn't speak with one voice for the entirety of the Muslim community. We would want to see the direction of travel and the engagement of different bodies before deciding, saying, well, that's the only group that we're going to work with. But do we want to engage? Yes, absolutely. Do we want to move on from the mistakes of the past? Yes, we do. And I think it's no accident that in Ed Miliband, you have a leader of the Labour Party who has signalled a change in direction. In fact, one of the reasons he was able to secure the victory in becoming leader of the party was his opposition to the Iraq War, was his opposition to 42-day detention, the sorts of policies which I think did a lot of harm in terms of damaging relationships between the government at the time, which was a Labour government, and the Muslim community.
So just very quickly on that, Sarah, before you sit down, by the way, if you've got questions, keep your hands up, please. If the community itself recognises organisations like the MCB as its legitimate representative, the way the Jewish community would have the Board of Deputies, for argument's sake, in a sense, why then not deal with them?
I don't think that the Labour Party has said that it would not deal with the MCB.
It did towards the end of its last term.
But the current leadership of the Labour Party hasn't said it would not deal with the MCB. But as I said, I do think there's a danger in saying this is the exclusive voice of the Muslim community, because I don't think that is correct. I think we actually just need to change the nature of our engagement.
So you certainly wouldn't boycott the MCB, that's what you're saying, but it's not the lone exclusive voice.
I do think, and I think it's an example that Jonathan touched on, it's in particular circumstances, we know that last summer, we may come on to this, the Jewish Board of Deputies and the MCB wrote a joint letter, and I think that shows something very, very important, the willingness of different religious communities to cooperate and work together around specific issues and specific causes. Well, if that's possible between different religious bodies, then why not between political parties and representatives of the Muslim community as well? So I definitely don't rule it out.
Okay, Mike, over to you, and I guess, Mike, you should also touch on the point about how you voted on the counter-terror law, please.
If I can take that bit backwards, if any of us are members of Parliament on May the 8th, we all face having to vote en bloc, particularly on big pieces of legislation, and most of the counter-terrorism legislation went through without a vote because it was cross-party. Only certain elements were their votes. And my approach to that is looking at the total package. Was the total package good even if elements of it needed addressing? And my approach to first of all, as a government MP, you are expected to vote with the government. But where you think there are anomalies, rather than scupper a bill which on the whole has a lot of good about it, the best way to deal with it is often go back and have dialogue with your ministerial colleagues. And what I've done in the past is take people in to speak to the relevant minister and say, look, this is an anomaly. This is not what you intended, and this is the bit that needs ironing out, rather than to scupper the whole bill. And unfortunately, when you're the Member of Parliament, you are one of 100 or 2 or 300 people voting. You do have limited power to change a major bill. And so your biggest influence is taking people in to deal with anomalies where you think it's got it wrong. But in terms of the general prevent strategy, and I think actually, to be fair, Hazel Blears, who was the Secretary of State at the time, Labour, who...
Sorry, just on your specific record was his question. On your specific record was your question, so I'm just having a look at the
I voted for memory, I voted for. I don't remember voting against it, because as I've explained, the whole package was worth supporting, even if there were bits that need addressing. Going back on to the issue on prevent, the thrust, to be fair to Hazel Blears, who was actually a very, very good Labour minister, who introduced this programme with the best of intentions, and no one can ever challenge her view on trying to build community cohesion. Unfortunately, the title, Preventing Violent Extremism, was the full title, was deeply insulting to the Muslim community. And so whilst the intention was good, some of the side effects were clearly bad. But one of the challenges that I face both as leader of the council, but also as a member of Parliament, is actually the difficulty we have in engaging with the Islamic community as a whole is a lack of structure. Who do you go to? Who are the leaders? Each of the mosques locally have their own management committee. There is no one particularly like the Board of Deputies that has a particular view, because half the people in this room would not recognise the MCB, and many would.
Shall we put that to a quick straw poll? Who recognises in this room the Muslim Council of Britain as the legitimate representative body of the Muslim community? Probably the majority.
But not
okay,
all.
Carry on.
But not all.
Well, I don't think all Jews would recognise the Board of Deputies as representatives either, is the point that you deal with them.
But in terms of engagement, yes, I have tried to engage. I did write to the MCB asking for a meeting so I could discuss certain issues, but sadly didn't get a response. Which issue, sorry.
Which issues? Sorry, let him finish.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The issue would have been about general Islamophobia and how we deal with it to ensure that I was fully informed. But in terms of the other issues about DCLG, from memory, because I used to sit alongside Eric Pickles at DCLG, when Baroness Farsi was a minister at DCLG, she did meet with the MCB, is my understanding. And so, whilst I know others haven't, but I think she did. So, but my personal opinion is that if the community chooses and elects a body to represent them, then engagement should follow. But the bottom line is, one thing that we all have to work on is the capacity and structures so that politicians, whether they're MPs or councillors, have people of authority that we can engage with, and so that we can deal with and get informed and address issues. One of the problems that we face is that the community Islamic community is fragmented, and there is not a common voice and a common board that we can go to for an authoritative decision.
All right. So basically the question is, last month, or maybe it was the month before, in the Israeli elections, Prime Minister Netanyahu said pretty much during my time there will be no Palestinian state. He later reversed that, just so you know, after he was elected. You can call it political chicanery, call it what you want. But nonetheless, he said under his watch there will be no Palestinian state. And the question goes further along the lines of boycotts of produce from Israeli settlements. Would the panelists support settlements that are illegal in the West Bank on Palestinian land, on land that the UN recognizes as illegal? Would they support a boycott on those illegal settlements? They might as well make their view on further settlements clear her as well here. And then the gentleman ended by talking about the fact that when Parliament, remember this is not binding on the government, this vote, but when Parliament decided 274 to 12 to recognize a Palestinian state, this was last October, if I'm not wrong, or something like that, Mike resigned in protest of Parliament's recognition of a Palestinian state. So that's more for Mike to answer rather than the other panelists. So the whole question... Sorry?
Just have to get a mic then.
Yeah, it's a mic. It's a mic. Is there something wrong with the mic?
No.
Oh, sorry. We should perhaps have had 5. I apologise. Right, okay, so let's, this is the last question. If you have a question at the back, if you have your hands up. But first, let's get the panelists' response to those 2 or 3 issues together. You had 2 or 3 questions. I've just bunched them all into one from what you've given me at the mosque. So let's start with Adele Ward, and maybe Caroline Lucas's, whatever your formal stance is as a party as well.
Yes, I'll give both of those. It was very sad to hear this from Netanyahu. I see, though, that his president is a little bit more open-minded, which was good to read. I'm not in any group. I think it's important for a politician to rise above it and to look after the whole community and to be the voice for all of you. And we certainly do work on this. There are candidates who work with Women in Black and so on, to help the people in Gaza, and I do talk to them and hear exactly what's going on because I haven't been there. We recognise we want a 2-state solution, both Israel and Palestine, safe and secure, so we support that. The Green Party does support a boycott on the settlements, but I really want to talk to people to hear that that is not also hurting people too much, because I'm getting different views on it. So I'd want to hear that myself.
Okay, that's fine. Jonathan.
Dare I say, the panel of politicians, a day before, 24 hours before an election when you thought he was going to lose, politicians say things and give pledges that they may later come to regret. And Netanyahu, I think, has rowed back from those remarks, and certainly some of the remarks he made just on polling day, I think it was, are very regrettable. It is worth remembering the only peace agreements Israel has ever negotiated with Egypt and with Jordan, but particularly with Egypt, involving the complete withdrawal from Sinai, were negotiated by a right-wing Israeli government led by Menachem Begin. And it is odd that 6 weeks after the Israeli election, there is still no government. I hope we'll do better in this. I hope we'll do better in this country 6 weeks after polling day. The Liberal Democrat position is that there must be a 2-state solution involving a secure and stable Palestinian state and a secure and stable Israeli state. That will only be achieved by negotiations between the 2 parties on the ground. As part of that negotiation, and at the end of that process, there will of course be recognition of a Palestinian state. But to do it, but a unilateral step in that respect we think would not help the situation, and we think would be wrong. Ultimately, the two parties have to negotiate, and we hope that Britain, as part of the Quartet, as part of the European Union, and the rest of the Western world will support negotiations between the parties.
So what's your view on settlements then in that case? Do you condemn the continuation of illegal settlements on illegal land, should we say, and do you or do you not support the boycott on produce from settlements?
I do not support any boycotts because I don't think boycotts promote dialogue, and I think everybody recognises that the ultimate solution will involve land swaps, which will involve most of the settlements becoming part of Israel in return for equivalent land passing into the Palestinian state.
Okay, and okay, so you answered that. Just very quickly, do you support boycotts against North Korea and Iran in that case?
I don't. We
About
support dialogue.
Okay, Sarah.
Forgive me if I speak a little personally for a second. I grew up in the Jewish community. My cousins live in Jerusalem, and I've been travelling to Israel and to the occupied territories for some years now. I go there pretty much once every year. So this is both a deeply personal issue for me, as well as one of political relevance, not just, of course, to the Jewish community, but to the Muslim communities and Palestinians right across the world. And as someone who, you're right, whoever's pointed it out, I am a friend of Israel. My cousins are Israeli citizens. But being a friend of Israel, what I want to see, more than anything, is two states for two peoples, both for the dignity and the independence of Palestinians and for the future of a secure and safe Israel. And my party also believes in seeing a negotiated two-state solution. I'll be completely honest, I was deeply disappointed by the victory of Bibi Netanyahu in the recent Israeli elections. I actually wrote about it publicly. I put a tweet to say that I regarded his election in the light of his statements as a blow to peace, a comment for which I received some criticism. But I do find it intensely frustrating that 25 years since the Oslo Accord, since what felt like progress with the image of Yasser Arafat shaking hands with Yitzhak Rabin on the White House lawn, that so little progress has been made and that the cycle of violence between the two peoples, particularly in Gaza, continues. And I do regard the rhetoric that Mr. Netanyahu, in the same way that I regard the rhetoric of Hamas as deeply unhelpful to bringing the negotiations which we need to fruition. I think his comments were deeply regrettable, as do I regard the continued policies which support settlement expansion. And the reason I'm so deeply against them is because I think they make the two-state solution a more and more remote possibility. And so I think it's possible to be a friend of Israel, but also to criticize the actions of the Israeli government, where they make us more and more far away from the two-state solution. With regard to the boycott question, I'm against boycotts, particularly academic and cultural boycotts, because I think they do the opposite of fostering dialogue. I know there are others who think that they could perhaps engender a breakthrough and a change in direction. I personally disagree with that. I also, for the same reason, disagree with my own party's stance on the unilateral declaration of Palestinian statehood. Basically, because I don't think it changes the reality on the ground for somebody living in Ramallah or Jenin or in Gaza, and because I think actually it pulls the two sides further apart and makes it less likely that they will actually sit down and broker the deal, which ultimately can only come from them.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Mike's going to answer, and then we'll take our final round of questions. If I can please ask somebody to keep the children a little quiet. I do apologise, yeah, it's disturbing things on this side. Mike, over to you.
Let's take a couple of the minor ones first, and I'll come back to my vote. The settlements, I've already on record as saying that I think that the expansion of the settlements is wrong and will not further the peace settlement. In terms of boycotts, no, because I actually think they will damage ordinary Palestinians first. It's easy when we're sat in our nice, warm, comfortable homes in Finchley and Golders Green to think it's a good idea. But it's a different thing when you're stood in Ramallah seeing the level of unemployment at 50% and saying we should be boycotting so that we can create more unemployment just because it makes us feel better. So I don't think it would help ordinary Palestinians, and that's why I don't think the boycotts is a good thing. I support a two-state negotiated solution, And being a friend of Israel does not mean you can't be a friend of the Palestinians. They are not mutually exclusive. We will agree on the outcome. We may disagree on the journey. And the reason why I resigned my position so I could vote is because I did not support a premature recognition of the state of Palestine, because it doesn't meet the requirements of statehood by international standards. You have to have, as a basis, agreed borders, agreed security. You also have to have both sides agreeing that each other can exist. And one of the real issues that really caused me some major concern was the involvement of Hamas. When Hamas Charter says that Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth and all Jews in the world should be killed, I could not do anything that gave encouragement to Hamas rather than to Fatah. And I say, well, that's in the Hamas Charter.
You can challenge him in a second. I believe Hamas have changed it, but you can challenge him in a second.
The last version of the Hamas Charter that I saw still had that. And I say to this audience, would this meeting be allowed by Hamas, where you are able to openly challenge your politicians? Would you have Christians and Jews sat here arguing about politics and policy if we had a Hamas government?
Yes,
and on
yes,
that basis,
yes. No, Mr. Pitt.
You can answer him in a second, please. Hold on. Hold on, Mike.
Okay.
Right, guys, just put your hands up, please. You can answer him in a second. Let him finish first, please.
You can disagree with me.
That is unfair.
Excuse me.
It might be unfair.
Unfair.
You can disagree with me. I'm explaining how I came to my point of view. You can disagree with it, but I'm explaining how I came to my decision. I do not believe that this would exist. This meeting, our pluralism, our democracy would exist in a Hamas-led government. And I did not think that vote would put peace any step